The asphalt stretched before him, slick with the day's rain. Streetlights cast an orange glow, their light swallowed by the encroaching darkness. He ran, each footfall a drumbeat in the quiet night. A familiar route, a nightly ritual. Not tonight. Not this time. He hadn't gone far when he saw him, standing beneath a flickering streetlight, a silhouette carved from the shadows. The man didn't move, just stood there, watching. His gaze sent a shiver down the jogger's spine. He tried to ignore him, focused on the rhythm of his breath, the pounding of his feet. He risked a glance, just a quick one, to see if the man was still there. He was, and he was smiling. A wide, unnatural grin that stretched across his face like a gash. It didn't reach his eyes. They were cold, empty, predatory. The jogger's pace quickened. He told himself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, a figment of his imagination. But deep down, a primal fear began to stir. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, hunted. He didn't dare look back. He could feel the man's presence behind him, a palpable weight in the stillness of the night. His breath grew ragged, his chest constricting with each inhale. The streetlights seemed to dim, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched towards him like grasping claws. He thought about calling for help, but his phone was tucked away in his armband. Besides, who would believe him? That a smiling man was stalking him through the suburbs? He pushed himself harder, his legs burning, his lungs screaming for air, but the feeling of dread only intensified. A sound pierced the quiet. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They were getting closer. He didn't need to look to know that the smiling man was following him. He was no longer trying to hide. He was toying with him. Panic surged through him, cold and sharp. He broke into a sprint, his feet slapping against the wet pavement. The houses blurred into streaks of light and shadow. But the footsteps kept pace, relentless, unwavering. He couldn't outrun him. He couldn't escape. He veered off the main road, ducking down a narrow side street. The houses were closer together here, their windows dark, unseeing eyes. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, a frantic tattoo against the silence. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The smiling man was gone. Relief washed over him, brief and fleeting. He had lost him. He slowed to a walk, his chest heaving, his body trembling with adrenaline. He turned the corner, and there he was, standing at the end of the street, bathed in the pale moonlight, his smile wider than ever. He was trapped. He turned and ran, his feet slipping on the wet pavement. He ducked down another street, then another, his mind racing, his body screaming for respite. He was lost in a labyrinth of his own fear, the houses swirling around him, the streetlights morphing into menacing figures. He didn't know how long he ran. Time lost all meaning. All he knew was the burning in his lungs, the ache in his muscles, the terror that clawed at his sanity. He had to escape. He had to find a way out. Then he saw it. Up ahead at the end of the street, a beacon in the darkness. The park. He could cut through the park, lose himself in the trees, the shadows. It was a long shot, but it was his only hope. He surged forward, adrenaline fueling his exhausted limbs. He could hear the man behind him, his footsteps closer now, his breathing heavy. But he didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. The park was within reach. He burst through the park gates, his lungs burning, his vision blurring. He veered off the path, plunging into the darkness of the trees. He could hear the man's footsteps following him, but they were fainter now, more hesitant. He had lost him. He had escaped. He collapsed behind a tree, his chest heaving, his mind reeling. He waited, listening for any sign of pursuit. But there was nothing. Only the rustling of leaves, the chirping of crickets, the distant hum of traffic. He was alone. He slowly got to his feet, his body aching, his mind numb. He stumbled out of the park, back into the familiar streets of his neighborhood. The houses seemed different now, sinister, watchful. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows that danced in his peripheral vision. He made it home, his legs heavy, his mind still racing. He locked the door behind him, the click of the latch echoing in the silence. He was safe, for now. But he knew, deep down, that he would never forget the smiling man, and he would never outrun the fear that now clung to him like a shadow.